Is there concern that Christian Encarnacion-Strand isn't going to be ready for opening day? Well, we're going to tell you on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, your Cincinnati Reds every single day. And my name is Jeff. His name is Steve. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We've been podcasting about the Reds for a combined 14 years. On today's show, one man dominated the first day of camp, and that man is Chase Burns. Later on in the show, we'll dissect the inner meaning of it all. In a few minutes, we will discuss which pitcher is the most reliable in the bullpen based on a new stat that I want to keep track of this year. But first, I have some concerns about what we're hearing about CES, and more specifically what we're not hearing about CES. And camp has barely even begun. That's all coming up on today's pod that is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And where we will get started here today, Steve, is with the Christian Encarnacion-Strand of it all. He is a guy that we've talked about this offseason with a shroud of mystery around him because he had all of the injuries to his right hand and his right wrist last year, barely played. He was shut down early on in the season, and even when he was healthy early on last season, he was very ineffective. I think is because he was being affected by pre-existing injuries in that right wrist that then compounded into new injuries in the right wrist. And this offseason, we haven't heard a lot about him. He played in the Arizona Fall League, and all reports were he was good, he was fine, he was ready to go, but we haven't heard anything since then. And now the big thing for me, and we like to talk about this a lot, where, you know, sometimes we craft takes and sometimes we're reading the tea leaves of what the reporters are saying. The reporters aren't saying a whole lot about our man CES, and I find that concerning.
Well, in fact, the reporters have said a whole lot by not saying anything about CES. Both Mark Sheldon and our good buddy Gordon Wittenmeyer have both put out their very, very early prediction on what the roster is going to look like. And both of those guys left CES off early on. That makes me wonder if there have not been some of those conversations that don't make their way into daylight that this team is famous for, that are saying they are going to start him out slow and open him up in the minor leagues, which kind of baffles me. I have been operating from a position, Jeff, that if he is healthy come opening day, he is on the roster. He is doing time at first base and DH. I have a hard time seeing them put him in AAA to start the season, because if he's healthy enough coming out of spring training to play every day in Louisville, he should be ready to go at the major league level. This is not a guy that, you know, is coming back from an injury mid-season. He's going to have the whole spring training just like everybody else. So yeah. I'm a little baffled as to why multiple beat writers have left him off of their rosters here at the beginning of spring training.
My initial reaction, and what I kind of, you know me, I'm optimistic in most cases. And what I kind of tried to default to on this is that they're being cautious because of the lack of information and reporting on CES's health this offseason. They're saying, okay, until we see him, until we know that he's in camp, we're going to say, yeah, we'll see him at some point, which is the long and short of what both Mark Sheldon and Gordon Wittenmeyer said about Christian Encarnacion-Strand. There was no reporting to the effect of, well, the Reds are really out on him. The Reds really aren't feeling CES in the big leagues this year, or at least early on. He's got to earn his way back. None of that was said. It's just the fact that they haven't said anything, which is really what gets me, because in a couple of cases, there were guys that were put on the opening day roster that you and I both believe should not be on the opening day roster over our man CES. And quite frankly, I think the best version of this lineup includes a healthy CES. This is a guy that is profiled by scouts to be a middle of the order, big bopper, the kind of guy that opposing pitchers are going to fear one day. He's got to develop into that. He isn't that right now, but he has that ceiling. So in order to see that ceiling, you're not going to see it develop in AAA. He's got to develop at the major league level. And I believe that if he is healthy, that should be the only qualifier for him to be on the major league roster. This is a completely different scenario from Noelvi Marte in that I don't think CES has to do a ton this spring except prove that he's healthy to be on the opening day roster, where Noelvi Marte, I don't know, can prove that he should be on the opening day roster.
Right. And I think it might be of note to talk about who both beat writers penciled in at first base over CES. In one case,
one common thread.
Steer, which, I mean, you and I both talked about that the signing of Austin Hayes, we thought may free up Spencer Steer to be more of a utility role. I see him as a viable third base option, but the writers are talking about him as a first base option. And I could see him getting time over there, but I have kind of been tunnel visioned on CES and Candelario as the first base DH kind of interchangeable part over there. And then Spencer Steer being able to cover innings at third, cover innings at second, cover innings in the outfield. I guess in a pinch at shortstop, he did play there some in the minor leagues. I don't know that I want to see a whole lot. I don't think he's
number 2 on the depth chart.
I don't think so. But I suppose we could see him there is what I'm saying. But It was interesting to me that in at least one of these not so late roster predictions that they have Spencer Steer penciled in as the primary first baseman.
Yeah, both of them do. They both have different third base options. Mark Sheldon says Gavin Lux will be the opening day third baseman, which I kind of alluded to yesterday's show. And then Gordon Whitmire sold that Jeimer Candelario is going to be your opening day third baseman. I don't buy into that very much at all. But I think that there is... I think it's cautious, right? I think that's where everybody is kind of approaching Christian Encarnacion-Strand, knowing how much he went through last season, where it just seemed like he got out of the gate slow, and then we found out, well, he was dealing with a nagging wrist injury, and then he gets hit on the wrist by a pitch in Texas, and that was really what spiraled everything out of control. They had him play through it, and then they had him get more x-rays, and then they found out it was worse, and that there was more swelling, and then he had a torn ligament, and it was just so many things that seemed to compound on this one spot on his body. And so I think there's definitely a little bit of caution when you're trying to evaluate a guy like that. That's why on the live show yesterday, whenever we got that question about could Christian Encarnacion with over under 25 homers for Christian Encarnacion-Strand, we both struggled to say, yeah, I think he's going to smash the over on that, because I think that playing time and how much he's actually going to be on the field is going to factor in mostly to that, more so than his talent, because I feel like we're going to see a bounce back from him. It's just, is it going to be for 162? I think more than likely it's going to be for like 122.
That's probably fair. I continue to struggle with the idea that he would go to Louisville. The other option here is, depending on how he feels, how he performs during spring training, they could do that extended spring training thing with him, and just leave him out in Goodyear for a few extra weeks, in which case, then I guess the writers' predictions kind of hold true. But I think you're right in abundance of caution, right? I'm not ready to project CES is not on this opening day roster, given everything the Reds have said and what we saw with the Arizona Fall League. Until I'm shown otherwise or told otherwise, I'm kind of holding out hope that on opening day, CES is available and is hitting well.
Now, and later on this week, we will give you our early roster prediction, and everydayers will know where we're going to kind of lean on a lot of different cases there, because we've kind of discussed it here recently, but we'll have our roster predictions out to you later on this week. But I tell you what, Steve, with pitchers and catchers reporting yesterday, and we talked a lot about starting pitcher rankings and things like that on yesterday's show, kind of wanted to look at the bullpen and really dive into what a reliable relief pitcher should be evaluated with. A statistic that I'm kind of cobbling together. I don't want to say I invented it, because it's just looking at a bunch of statistics and kind of it's like nerds clustering them. But I'm going to tell you who the most reliable relief pitcher on the Reds bullpen is coming up next. You can get a big return over on FanDuel as we move into MLB futures season. And you can look over at some of the Reds futures that they have. FanDuel's got a lot of great different things. And one of the slam dunk futures that I'm getting in on is Elly De La Cruz and his steal total. Right now, Elly De La Cruz steal total at 53.5. Like, I think he's going to fall out of bed with more steals than that. I get it. Terry Francona's going to try to rein him in a little bit, but he's not really going to rein him in and keep him from stealing bases. I think he might get more steals than he had last season. So I think it's an easy bet to place the over on 53.5 steals for Elly De La Cruz in 2025. Go check it out over on FanDuel. They've got all kinds of great futures like that and more. Plus, new users can win $150 in bonus bets off their first winning $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel is the official sports book of Locked On.
Make sure you're subscribed to the show so that you don't miss an episode. Click the like button down there. Click that notification bell. And if you can't watch us here on YouTube, make sure you take us with you on the road. We're on every single podcasting feed that exists, I think. So take us with you. We want to go to the gym. We want to go in the car. We'll go for a walk with you down by the river. We just want to talk baseball with you. All right, Jeff, you've got some ideas about relief pitcher reliability. And as we were working through this, you're more of the stats guy than me, especially the new stats. Is why I rely on you for this kind of thing. And at first I was like, oh boy, here we go. But then as you worked through this, I'm like, well, that confirms the eye test. That kind of confirms the things that we were saying all along. So you've come up with kind of a statistical way for me to verbalize my eye test of what I saw out of the Reds bullpen last year.
And I feel like I need a name for this because it's kind of long without the name. The statistic is something where I combine basically a lot of game log stuff. It's a relief pitcher makes an appearance and does not allow a base runner. So no walks, no hits, no hit batsman, no nothing like that. And then there's even like a step further of it. It's like this stat plus. So no base runners plus at least one strikeout. Is kind of where I'm at with this, because we talk about this a lot. We try to inform the folks when it comes to relief pitching that there's not really one reliable statistic for it. Like, we talk a lot about strikeout to walk ratio. We talk a lot about, FIP and things like that, but there's not like a number that encapsulates what you want from a relief pitcher. And what do you want? You want a clean inning. You want somebody you can rely on to bring you that clean inning. I almost think of like clean sheet, like a soccer statistic for goalies, but maybe not that. Maybe a better name than that, because baseball is better than soccer. But I look at this and I think it will surprise you, because last season, as far as appearances without allowing a base runner, the pitcher who was the best at that on the Reds roster is no longer on the Reds roster anymore. It's Fernando Cruz. Fernando Cruz had 26 appearances without allowing a base runner. So he gone. We can't count him. The next guy on the list, Sam Moll. We're not talking about Alexis Diaz. We're not even talking about the newcomer and Taylor Rogers. Darth Moll himself kept the base paths clean the most.
It's funny. This lines up with what we'll call my gut reliability feeling, because, I've talked often last year about, a guy coming out of the bullpen and me feeling like we were going to have a good outcome versus me feeling like I needed to get the Rolaids ready, Yeah. And for me, Sam Moll was that guy. I felt good whenever he came in. I wasn't really particularly worried. And in a perfect scenario, you would want your guy at the top of this list to be Alexis Diaz. And we wanted that guy to be Alexis Diaz, but it's not Alexis Diaz. And anytime he came into a game last year, my gut supports what your stat is saying, which is he was not the most reliable guy out of this bullpen. So I like that. I like that as we work through this and you read this list, it's going to, if you think back on the 2024 season, I think people are going to take this list and be like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt as David Bell was pointing at the bullpen and we saw who was coming out. That lines up. It checks.
I like the gut check stat, maybe, or bullpen gut check. But it also makes me remember, because you brought up Rolaids. Remember, like, back when the or when the award for the Rolaids Relief Man of the Year award or
Yeah.
something like that, like, that seems sort of counterintuitive, because you don't want to reach for the Rolaids when the guy comes out of the bullpen. But hey, anyway, the irony is fun. I love irony. But when it comes to this statistic, it was Sam Moll first, Alexis Diaz second, and then you get Taylor Rogers and Brent Suter tied for third most of this number. What intrigues me the most is the percentage of time that a relief pitcher did this. So not just the total number, but, how many times opposed to how many appearances he actually made throughout the season. Again, Sam Moll leads in this, but this actually pushes Alexis Diaz down the list. Now, Diaz made 60 appearances. It's the second most on the current staff to Taylor Rogers, who obviously made all of his appearances for the Giants last year. But you had 16 out of 60 appearances for Alexis Diaz where he kept the base paths clean. And then if you increase this and you add a strikeout to it, it still doesn't actually help Alexis Diaz. It's still Sam Moll that's first, and then it's Diaz that's second. I find it intriguing, because I think that when we talk about the bullpen, and when we talked about the acquisition of Taylor Rogers, we said that it's Diaz and Rogers 1A, 1B leading this bullpen. And I think we look at, like, the talent and the body of work and the resume and all this other stuff, and we say that's what we get. But I think we really undersell the value of Sam Moll to this bullpen. And I think that he needs to be given his flowers in this case. He is a guy that we can count on in clutch, tough situations.
Well, he's not flashy, right? And he
Right.
doesn't get the hype and the billing of a closer. But you look at what that stat says about Alexis Diaz. That stat says that 44 out of 60 times, he came into a game and allowed a base run. That is not closer material. That is not closer stuff. And it really supports the narrative we had about Alexis Diaz all of 2024, which is something's not right. He's not getting it done. He's not that guy right now. And now I set that up to say this. I think he can still be that guy. I think 60 appearances may have just been too much for him. I think that I hope I'm wrong about this, but I think he channeled his inner Raisel Iglesias a little bit in 2024 and couldn't get himself hyped up in every situation that he was put in to face. And that's a problem. If you can only pitch in the ninth inning when things are, I've got no use for you. I need the shutdown reliever to be the shutdown reliever. If I need him in the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, I don't care. I need these guys to be able to pitch in these situations. And I just don't understand the mentality of, I can't get myself hyped up to get this out in the 7th inning. It's got to be in the 9th inning. But I feel like there was a component of that to Alexis Diaz in 2024. And I think that led to what we saw, which was 44 games that he allowed a base runner. And then he got himself hyped up and the adrenaline kicked in and he turned a corner more often than not and got those guys out, or at least got the Reds out of that inning. But I think this is interesting, Jeff. It really, I was wondering if it was going to move me one way or the other. And it just tells me that my good old baseball gut was accurate in all of 2024.
Right. And I think that that's the important thing too, right? Like, if you're looking at a statistic and it's like fighting your gut feeling about that, then you need to find another statistic to see if you can kind of put it all together. That's what I try to do. I try not to be like, well, the numbers say this, so this is who he is. Like, there's other things to it. And obviously, and I mentioned at the top of the segment that Fernando Cruz was the guy that led them in this statistic. He was also the guy that blew up the most in the second half. There's two sides to this coin. I just feel like this is a good way to quantify the reliability in a relief pitcher. And we're going to be talking about this a lot more throughout the season.
With the Fernando Cruz thing, and, we talked about this before we recorded, that, this stat is really kind of a cumulative. You get a point, right? You came in, you had a clean inning, you got a strikeout, you get a point. So if you look at Fernando Cruz's points in 2024, he had a whole lot of points around April and May. little bit less in June, a little bit less in July, a little bit less in August, almost none in September, right?
Yeah.
So that, again, you can look at the totality of his 2024 season, and it shows you the same thing we were talking about, which is, too much use. He's not sharp. I think he's tired. I think too many innings. I think too many the graph, if you put that on a graph, it would show you the same thing that the narrative said throughout the course of the year, which is why I kind of like how you've put this together.
And I hope that this means we will see Sam Moll a lot more this year, because I believe that he is criminally underappreciated on this bullpen.
All right, Jeff. We saw pitchers and catchers report yesterday, and all of the great videos that we've been waiting for, which is the guys strolling in from the parking lot. I mentioned yesterday we were able to confirm Matt McLain still has a shoulder. It was present. Yeah. But generally the Reds will pick a guy and focus on that guy. And I was surprised to see that this year it's somebody new. We're going to talk about Chase Burns coming up next.
You can catch us on every audio podcasting platform out there in case you can't watch us on YouTube. And always make sure, as we get closer and more into spring training and stuff, a couple of weeks from now, we will begin to go live on Mondays on a regular basis. Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. That won't be until about March 10th, I believe, will be our first live Monday, and beginning a series of live Mondays throughout the entire season, because we're going to be with you every single day. All right, Steve, like you mentioned, Chase Burns was all over the socials. He was all over the videos, the pictures, and all the things. We saw him walking in. We saw him on the mound. We saw him in a bullpen session, and we saw the velocity. We saw the stuff that he has, and that is who he is. That is why the Reds drafted him number 2 overall. That is why they believe that he is the guy for the future. And we might even see him this year. I think that there's something in all of this coverage that it's prepping Reds country for Chase Burns mania. We got to come up with a better name there.
We've seen this movie before. We've seen this movie with Hunter Greene. We saw this movie to some extent with Rhett Lowder. This is how they treat starting pitchers that they think are going to be something, that they think are going to be contributing soon. Now, I don't know that it means this year, but I don't think that's far-fetched either. But I think that what this is they are using this camp as an opportunity to get Chase Burns acclimated to the big league life and what that looks like, and the attention and the spotlight. And I'm here for it. What I don't want to do, we got carried away with Hunter Greene. And by we, that's you, that's me, that's the beat writers, that's the Reds, that's everybody got carried away with Hunter Greene. And we set that expectation bar so high up here that Hunter Greene still could never really reach where we set the expectation bar, although he's trying pretty good right now.
He has yet to win multiple Cy Youngs.
He has yet to win multiple Cy Youngs, correct. I don't want to do that same thing with Chase Burns, but I do like them giving him a little taste of the spotlight as he arrived at camp yesterday. I think it's a good indicator about how the Reds feel about him, how they think he is going to be a contributor to this team. And I think it's good for Chase Burns, just as the athlete, to see that embrace from the team, and that embrace that he's being considered, as part of this future pretty quick.
I got a thought. Chase Burns on the mound for the Dayton Dragons against the Reds in that final tune-up before opening day. So that, the whole prospects versus the big leaguers game. Mm-hmm. Chase Burns starting against the Reds.
I could see that happening. That's not that.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it'd be a lot of fun. I really feel like his trajectory is going to be very similar to Rhett Lowder. I think that we will see him at some point this year, probably August, maybe late July. Part of it's going to be with the health of the starting staff. I mean, that was the whole reason Rhett Lowder even made it to the big leagues last year, is because there was no health in the starting staff. So they have a little bit more reliability there, and there's a chance that keeps Chase Burns from the big leagues this year. But I do wonder if he begins the year in Dayton like Rhett Lowder did, or if they skip that step and put him in Chattanooga, because most scouting reports say that Rhett Lowder's floor, Rhett Lowder's base, has been one of the highest that they've seen. He is already a very polished pitcher, even though he has barely begun his major league career. Chase Burns, not so much, but Chase Burns' ceiling is ridiculous. So is that something that the Reds could be like, let's start him in Chattanooga where we really begin to know something about a guy? Or are they going to, you think it's going to be Dayton?
Yeah, it's going to be Dayton. So, he pitched all of 100 innings in 2024, all of them for Wake Forest. So they're going to put him in Dayton. They're going to spin him up slow. They're going to ask him to kind of get a feel for the wear and tear of the beginnings of a season. And they're going to let him work his way up. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to make more than 4 or 5 starts in Dayton. But the way they handled Rhett Lowder, I think, is a preview of how they're going to handle Chase Burns. And how fast he moves up the levels will be up to him. But they're going to start him down there. And if he's mowing down the single A guys, the Reds can then be like, yep, good. That's exactly what we expected you to do. On to Chattanooga. Let's see what you got there. Because if you remember, when Rhett Lowder moved up, it took him a start or two to get back in the groove. And then he got in the groove. And then we saw him go to AAA. And then same again, get back in the groove. And then, of course, everybody's arms broke at the big league level and he had to go. So I see the same thing, same exact trajectory for Chase Burns. Dayton, Chattanooga, Louisville, and then wait for an opportunity. And I think he'll move quickly, but he's going to start from Dayton. Which is why I think your idea of him pitching that exhibition game is a great idea. That being his, first real minor league action. I like that.
I hope and it will be Vince Harrison managing the Dragons against the Reds. And I hope Vince gets the chance to be like, all right, Chase Burns, you're going to go out there, you're going to throw a couple of innings. Chase Petty's then going to come in after you throw a couple of innings. Then we're going to have Connor Phillips come in and throw a couple of innings. And we're going to have all these guys that it's like, yes, the Reds starting staff in the majors right now is very reliable and very exciting. But at the same time, there's these other guys that we've got a real good shot to see this year. I saw and I'm trying to remember if it was The Athletic or if it was MLB.com, and I'm blanking on because it was a national writer. But they were looking at the Reds, maybe it was Baseball America. Anyway, they were looking at the Reds, and they were saying, could 2025 be similar to 2023? And I'm like, there's no possible way. And then they started laying it out, and they're like, well, Chase Petty, Chase Burns. You've got a couple of relief pitchers in Zach Maxwell and Luis May. You've got the possibility of maybe Sal Stewart just going off because he dealt with injuries last year, and that's kind of why last year was slow played for him. Could he make his way by the end of the year to the big leagues? Things like that. And, of course, you got guys like Adam Dunn and Blake Blake Dunn.
That would be something. I can tell you this: if the Reds call up Adam Dunn, we're going live. That's just the way that is going to be a special report.
That's our four-hitter.
That's our four-hitter. Man. Yeah.
If there was ever a guy that could be the cleanup hitter, guaranteed, that'd be him. Anyway, yes, there's a real possibility that the Reds could have another influx of super young, super talented players, and Chase Burns is at the head of that. And I think that's why we saw him be the featured star of day one of camp.
Well, let's see how it plays out. The only caveat I say to that, Jeff, is if all those starting pitchers are getting called up, it means that there's been another epic level of arm injuries at the big league level. Because who are you sending down? Because who are you sending down, right?
But I'm not saying you're sending down healthy guys. I'm saying
to get Chase Petty, to get Chase Burns, you're losing who? You're losing Singer. You're losing Nick Martinez. You're losing.
Well, we know Nick Lodolo is going to be on the injury list at some point. Nick Lodolo is going to hit the IL at some point. Andrew Abbott's going to be on the IL at some point. Hunter Greene is going to be on the IL at some point. Hopefully, those are all maintenance, missed 2 starts, hit the 10-day IL, and then you're right back. But that's where we're going to get this. The Reds are going to have at least 8 starters start again.
No, this is hashtag Jeff hates starting pitching. That's what we're doing. All right. That's where we're going to end it for today. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks, as always, for making us your first listen. Go make your second listen, the Locked On MLB podcast. We love Sully over there. Go check him out. There's a link for his show down in the description of ours. We will be back in your feeds tomorrow. And as always, we're going to be gathering up all of the news, all the information, all the rumors, and all of the action coming out of Goodyear, gathering all that up, bringing it back right here to keep you locked on Reds every single day. Hashtag Jeff loves arm injuries. What are you doing?
Hashtag Steven often hashtag.